The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode 76.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV, series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Voyager episode, Eye of the Needle.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm an 80s kid. Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
People. I don't know why I said people. Folks, remember
People
to like
and
the
folks. They both
people
work.
yes, they're both. People are folks. Remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, where we're facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. And please retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and leave comments. All that engagement, that social media jargon we use, juices the algorithms and makes sure that people who've actually asked to see our content gets to see our content on the various social networks. So we really do appreciate that. Plus, we love having this interaction with you, so we would really appreciate hearing from you in those ways. So we're talking about Star Trek Voyager. We're still in the first season, and we're talking about this next episode called Eye of the Needle, where we're dealing with yet another spatial anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
In this case,
at least the Voyager doesn't have to crash through at this time.
Yes,
exactly.
It's not stuck inside it, although something does get stuck inside. But so basically, in brief, in one sentence, Voyager makes contact with a Romulan ship through a wormhole that leads back to the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah.
The question the episode asks is, imagine if the only possible way home was trying to convince someone who doesn't trust you to trust you about something completely improbable. And that's really what's at the crux of this story.
Yeah. This is one of the better first season Voyager episodes, to my mind. It may be the best.
Yes.
It certainly has fewer of the flaws that first season Voyager tends to. It's more interesting. It's more character involved. There are, real emotional stakes here, and it plays out in stages that are, it's nicely done. I mean, it's not great, but it's not bad either. And so that makes it good by relative standards for first season Voyager.
Is it a coincidence that this one doesn't include any of first season Neelix's awkwardness?
Yeah, that probably helps.
I like Neelix in later seasons, but this first season Neelix is really hard to swallow.
You didn't have the Neelix awkwardness, but you did have the eager puppy Harry Kim in it.
Yes.
Oh, the eager puppy Cass is even worse to my mind, but we'll talk about that.
Yep.
One thing, so initially they make contact with they find this wormhole. And one of the things that they've established in Star Trek is that there are almost no stable wormholes. The only stable wormhole known to exist is the one
Bajoran
at Bajor.
Yeah.
And it's only stable because the prophets are running it. Other wormholes, one end or the other will drift, or they'll cease to exist, or things like that. So they find this wormhole, and Tuvok points out that, there's only a 1 in 4 chance it's going to go to the Alpha Quadrant.
I have a problem with that logic, by the way.
I was going to say, as opposed to anywhere else in the universe, the odds are a lot less than 1 in 4.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say given the vast distances involved, even if we just say it's just going to go somewhere in the galaxy, isn't ending up on the far side of the Alpha Quadrant just as bad? Like, still would be years and years and years away.
Yeah, but it might not be 70. It also might just go part way to the Alpha Quadrant. But anytime you find a wormhole, if you're trying to get home, you want to know where it goes and how much closer or farther it's going to take you.
Right, because there's a chance it could take you further away.
Yeah.
Well, there's in theory, there could be the chance that it could go to the Andromeda Galaxy. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
They also, and I'm going to nitpick here some, they have, they describe this wormhole as being virtually microscopic because it's only 30 centimeters across. And it's like 30 centimeters is a foot.
Yeah.
Right.
On what scale is that virtually microscopic? I mean, you've
virtual
got
to the universe or the ship, I guess.
But everything is on that. So, and then they send out, because it's virtually microscopic, they send out a microprobe, not just a probe, but a microprobe, which then gets stuck in it.
Now, did anybody else think that they missed an opportunity to name the microprobe the Camel?
No, that would be good. Yeah, and they could name the wormhole the Eye of the Needle, which is actually a better name than Harry Kim's wormhole, which Tom Paris proposes.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate name.
and from the unusual size of the wormhole, Janeway postulates that we're seeing a wormhole in an advanced state of decay, that it's been collapsing for centuries. In which case, how is it not stable? It seems to have been stable over centuries.
Right.
Right. Also, you can tell it's old because it's wrinkly.
Yeah.
So one of the things is, it's just their luck to find the smallest wormhole ever. I mean, that's just Voyager's bad luck. It's a bad luck ship. One of the things I want to point out is, given that we're talking about the script here in the writing, is I didn't mention at the top, but this is the first screenplay written by the executive producer for the show, Jerry Taylor, that she's written on her own. She's chimed in on a couple of previous ones. So I did want to mention that, and that's one of the reasons I think why this one is better than others have been.
Jerry Taylor, incidentally, was a really good addition to the Star Trek staff when she came in. She had, unlike the previous people who'd been overseeing the writers, Jerry reportedly had a very nurturing attitude towards them and made them feel valued and really helped them grow as writers in a way previous producers had not.
Right. She I think she worked on Next Gen as well.
Yes,
right?
yeah, that's when she came in.
Okay. Next Gen DS9. And the story itself came from Hilary Bader, who was involved in the DS9 Rules of Acquisition and a bunch of other.
She was an intern. She started as an intern on DS9, which is awesome. I've heard it said that Star Trek did more to nurture young talent or unknown talent than most other shows out there. So,
most shows will not most shows do not take unsolicited scripts and pitches, and Star Trek did, and it launched the careers of bunches of writers as a result.
One thing I want to throw at the top is, because we know what they connect with a Romulan ship on the other side. Was it a mistake to feature a connection with an Alpha Quadrant race so early, to kind of rely? Star Trek has tended to do this thing where at the beginning of each of the new series, after original series, of course, they have this tendency to want to reach back and pull something from the older series in order to remind you of the connection with that older series. And this is in a way doing that. Like, we need this Alpha Quadrant, enemy that we're going to pull forward. Did it work?
I don't think it was a mistake.
Okay.
It's actually when they're first in the Delta Quadrant and the separation anxiety is at its greatest, that it's going to have the most emotional impact to have some kind of fleeting contact with the Alpha Quadrant. If we waited until season 2 or 3, they would have adapted to life in the Delta Quadrant much more. If you're going to tell this story, I think first season is actually a good time to do it.
There is a part of the end of this episode that I don't like relating to that, but in general, I agree that the idea of that they did make contact with someone from the Alpha Quadrant, and to give that little bit of hope, even if, again, it did lead to the Harry Kim as eager puppy syndrome.
Yeah.
So when they find this wormhole, they initially, they send in the microprobe, and then it gets stuck, and they then determine that someone from the other end of the wormhole is scanning them, is scanning the probe. And through the probe, they're able to establish apparently first a text link, and then a voice link, and finally then a video link, and finally a transporter link. Mm-hmm. So we have the show kind of stayed in stages as the amount of contact they're able to make gets bigger and bigger. And initially, once they establish, they've had the text link, then they get the voice link. And so Janeway's talking to the Romulan commander and is saying, can you please send messages for us? We've all lost people. My crew is not big. Can we please record brief messages for our family and friends? And can you send them to Starfleet? Because it would take years for them to get there via subspace. And this kind of points to something that I think, unless I'm not remembering something, this is sort of a flaw to me, because it's entirely understandable what she does in this episode and say, okay, now we seem to have a real-time connection, so let's send those messages. But they should have been sending these messages all along. They should have, the first thing, once they are in the Delta Quadrant, they should have said, okay, it's going to take us 70 years to get back. It's going to take 5 years, let's say, to send a message to the Alpha Quadrant and get a reply by subspace. So let's send that message now. Let's let them know we survived. We're here in the Delta Quadrant. Here's our location. Here's where we're coming from. Here's our status. Here's a list of everybody who's alive. And here are their messages for their family and friends, even though they're not going to get there for 2.5 years. And then they should be sending a status report every single week.
Right.
Because as they discover new stuff in the Delta Quadrant, Starfleet needs to know about that. They don't want to risk saving all of the knowledge on the ship in case it blows up halfway back. They should be notifying them of every new discovery they make. Right. And then, come season 5, we get the first reply from Starfleet. We got your message via subspace. You sent it 2.5 years ago, 5 years ago by the time you received this. And here are dramatic developments in the Federation you don't know about.
And oh, by the way, as they're moving closer to the Alpha Quadrant, those messages will come quicker.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that is a flaw in this, is that this idea that they're not trying to communicate at all. But I suppose it just ups the drama. One thing I want to point out is they shoot the probe in and it gets stuck in a gravitational eddy. And Father Corey, as you know, like I know, when you get stuck, you have to rock it back and forth until you get loose, and you got to goose the gas a little. Yeah. If you're stuck in, at least it works with snow. I don't know about the.
I was going to say, in the gravitational eddy that we've got sitting outside, 6 inches of it we got over the weekend. If we get stuck in snow, you don't just let it sit there until your car bogs down. You try to rock it out, and sometimes you can't, and that's why we have tow trucks.
So seriously, back to the show. That we have our B plot, which is the doctor, who is the EMH, is in sickbay, and we start off with him treating a crewman who's injured, and the
who's
crewman,
rude,
who treats the doctor as if he isn't even there and only talks to Cass, whereas Cass treats the doctor like he's real, and we have this throughout the episode where Cass goes to the doctor, goes to the captain, and she makes the case that because he's a hologram, even though he's a hologram, he should be treated with respect and consideration, that he's alive. And meanwhile, Janeway says, well, actually, we were thinking of reprogramming him because his personality sucks.
Yeah, I love the way she said, I've been hearing the opposite side of this discussion. People have been complaining that he's rude, arrogant, and abrasive.
Yeah, and Cass's advocacy for the doctor sort of, gets the captain to start thinking about it. She was thinking of the EMH as a piece of equipment, and Cass wasn't.
And this is really something I don't. So the guy who keeps injuring himself while he's exercising is comes off as a jerk. But I'm sorry, Data is a toaster, and and the doctor is a virtual assistant, and it's like Janeway should have sat down with Cass and said, Cass, I'm sorry, but you're becoming overly emotionally attached to your iPhone. Siri is not a real person.
Right.
Should we be asking, so Google, would you like this? Would you like, would you like to be able to turn yourself on and off at will? Would you like to, be able to leave the house on your own?
Father Corey, Google does turn itself on and off at will. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
This is another thing. I mean, the whole idea of one of the tussles the Doctor has is over being left on when he doesn't want to be on, or being turned off when he doesn't want to be turned off. It's like, guys, my iPhone has settings that let me control that right now. I can tell it never turn off. I can tell it turn off after this amount of time if you're not being used. I mean, this should have been solved already in 24th century technology.
Right. And the Doctor, by the end of this, the Doctor, finally decided.
And if there's an emergency, my phone can wake up. They have those notifications and stuff.
Yeah.
So we already got this one licked.
Yeah. They apparently forgot by the 24th century. So we resolved this by the same officer ending up in sickbay again with another injury, and the Doctor telling him off and I'm going to put you on report, and if you keep injuring yourself at work, I'm going to have to talk to your supervisor about it. It's like, ooh, smackdown. Yeah. And then we end with the Doctor requesting a name, which he never gets.
Fortunately.
Yes.
He gets it for one episode, but then it was a hologram that he fell in love with, and so he never told anybody what it was.
Well, he gets ones like over time. We try on different ones at different moments. Yeah, and then in fact the one where we see the future, where after they've got back home, that's the one where he's was he Dr. Schweitzer or something like that? Is that when where he's decided to be Schweitzer? I forget
can't remember
if that's Schweitzer.
No, I think that's the one where it was the holographic Viking chick that he fell in love with. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's interesting that they bring it up here, but it never actually gets resolved. He's always just the Doctor.
The only thing I like about that whole plot line is the fact is this is really where they start developing the Doctor as a character.
Yes.
I mean, this is really where in the series he actually starts developing as a character and not just as a virtual assistant.
Yes.
And of course, that leads to some actually really good episodes much later down the road, but we're not there yet.
Yes.
Yeah. We're not there yet at all.
Well, something else that comes up is that Harry is working with B'Elanna on this problem of the communications, and he gets very concerned that B'Elanna doesn't have anyone back home who's missing her. And we actually get a lot of B'Elanna's backstory here, where her father was a human, her mother was Klingon. They split up early. She hasn't seen either of her parents in many years.
Doesn't even know where they are for sure. Thinks her mom is on the Klingon homeworld, maybe.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And that's an interesting little bit of character development where, frankly, B'Elanna, we kind of established if she gets back to the Alpha Quadrant or not, it really is not different for her. She's with the people that she knows, and that's interesting.
She still can't go to Disneyland, though.
No,
not with the replicator hologram rations they must have.
That's right. Yeah. I noticed one of the things I noticed was how much technobabble we get in this. So much like pseudoscientific stuff that is thrown around. Lots and lots of lines with like a wall of it almost. So let's get back to this to the plot though, which is that the guy on the other side of the wormhole that they've contacted doesn't believe they're in the Delta Quadrant. They're not sure who he is yet, right off the bat. They don't know there's a Romulan, but he doesn't believe them when they say they're in the Delta Quadrant. Which
this is a little bit like it's the middle of the Cold War. Things are really tense with the Russians. There's a Russian sub-commander. He gets a radio transmission saying, "Help! We're an American Navy ship and we're stuck on Mars."
Yeah.
Right. Yes. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. I wouldn't believe him either. It turns out it's a Romulan scientist who may or may not be conducting some secret research.
Would explain why he's probing the probe.
Yes.
Yep. There's one weakness though with this revelation about the science ship. He calls it that he's a cargo ship. That's what he says. He's hauling cargo. And then the Voyager's crew surmises that he's science. And then when Janeway actually says, "Well, I know you're a scientist, science ship, blah, 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 blah." And the guy doesn't make any objection to that whatsoever. He doesn't say, no, I'm really a cargo ship. We're really not science. This is cargo. We're hauling cargo. Lots of cargo.
Tuna man. Yeah, he's a cargo ship captain scanning wormholes.
It's also he's been in space for a year and is going to be in space for another year at least before he gets home. So this is some kind of long-term mission he's on. And it seems like he's on a one-man ship.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He's the only person we see, including when we see him on the bridge. And he volunteers, even though he's the captain, he's the one who volunteers to beam over once they get the transporter link set up. And so it seems like he's the only guy there, which is kind of odd for a science mission on a ship.
So there's this scene where he's cut them off because he thinks they're lying to him, and then they finally get him back on the comms in the middle of the night, apparently, where Janeway's asleep. And we get this scene of Janeway talking to him in her nightgown. Does that seem a little like an odd, like, were they trying to do something there? Were they trying to make like Captain Janeway into, nerdy sex symbols of some sort? What do you think?
I don't think so.
That's just continuing a trend with Star Trek, because I know at least in Next Generation and DS9 there were scenes where the captains are in their pajamas.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
I think it's really an illustration that the crew, and especially the captain, has to be ready to take the 3 a.m. phone call.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's true. He thinks Janeway's a spy, by the way, at this point, and so she kind of points out the lack of logic in that conclusion. But she asks him to convey messages from the crew to their families, and he wants to wait for his superiors to give the okay.
This Romulan Senate has to approve. Wow.
Yeah, that's some bureaucracy they get there in the Romulan Empire. But she convinces him, and then this is when, now that they've got him to agree to take the messages, this is when Torres says, I think I might actually have something even better. We might be able to piggyback a transporter beam on the comlink.
And that's the moment where the episode is doomed, because this is an early first season episode. There's no way the crew is beaming back to the Alpha Quadrant this early in the series. This is not by J. Michael Straczynski, where he fakes you out thinking the series is about one thing and then it's something else. So this is the moment where that even though Janeway is wistfully thinking about beaming back home to the Alpha Quadrant, that ain't never going to happen. Things are going to go horribly wrong.
I wonder, would they have self-destructed the Voyager instead of leaving it for someone to get?
I'm sure they would have scuttled, Yeah,
but then they'd be stuck, like, even if it turns out it was the right time, spoilers alert, they'd be on a Romulan ship in the Alpha Quadrant behind, quote-unquote, enemy lines. I mean, they'd be back in the Alpha Quadrant, but they might not be any better off.
It might still take just as long to get home.
Yeah.
Although, if you had Russian, think about it in a Cold War analogy. If you had an American ship that was in distress and a Russian crew rescued them, they would be repatriated. I mean, unless they were covert spies or something, which they weren't. But they would be repatriated, and the Russians would trumpet it as a great propaganda victory. Capable Russians help helpless Americans.
Well, there was something like that actually happened at the end of World War II. I think it was the B-25 bomber. Was one of them landed in Russia after bombing in Japan, and the Russians were very happy to send the troops back. Sent the crew back. And kept the plane and tore the thing down and duplicated it down to missing rivets and made their own bombers out of it before they sent the original back.
Yeah,
so that might have been the Doolittle raid, even. But yeah,
I don't think it was part of that mission, but it was a bombing mission nonetheless.
So we have another scene with Kes and the doctor. Kes is learning learning to become a nurse or medic, and she's apparently preternaturally gifted in this area.
I think it's probably not just this area. If you think about the fact Ocampans only live for 7 years and they're a technological society, they must be freakishly fast learners.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. So she says something about how she enjoys studying anatomy and would like to see an autopsy sometime. The way she says that is really disturbing.
It is. I mean, she initially, early on, I wanted to comment on this. Early on, she says she wants more than first aid training. She wants to study anatomy. So he gives her some pads. Like, you can't just read whatever book on whatever pad you want.
That's a Star Trek thing. I love that. Like, we have to have multiple pads. It's like we have multiple pieces of paper.
Well, and what's so funny is they never foresaw the advent of the iPad.
Right.
Because with an iPad, I want to read another book. Hit back, hit library, grab the book, next book.
Yeah,
exactly. But then when she comes back in, having read the books, she has this, and this is true, not a lot of Kes's line delivery in this episode is, I don't know if the director told it to do it this way or what, but a lot of her line delivery is sexy, suggestive, like she's flirting at the doctor.
Yes.
And she comes back and says, and so I don't know if they were thinking about maybe having a romantic triangle with her and Neelix and the doctor. But when she comes back from having read the book, she says, I enjoyed studying anatomy. and it's just so suggestive. And then she says, it would be interesting to see an autopsy sometime. And it's like,
Yeah.
whoa,
Well-
are we thinking necrophilia here?
Or I just thought it was just creepy. Like I would love to take a body apart. Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of creepy.
Well, and then they continue the whole, suggestive thing by when they think that everybody's going to be beaming off the ship, she gives him a smooch on the cheek. And it's like, what?
Well, I
Where'd that
think this
come
is
from?
really the beginning of that. There's an ongoing thread from this point where Neelix is jealous of. Well, first he was jealous of Paris, and then he'll be jealous of the Doctor, and because the Doctor is going to have a crush on Cass.
Yep.
And then later on, the Doctor will have a crush on Seven because the Doctor apparently
Because Seven replaces Cass.
right
Exactly.
and the Doctor apparently has been programmed to have crushes on pretty girls or something. But it's just very strange. But I think this is the root of that. Eventually, this
It
development
is.
in the characters. So that I want to mention that other part where it comes up that if they all beam off over to the Romulan ship, well, they can't take the EMH. She's stuck. He'll be
Mhm.
left behind and presumably destroyed when the ship is destroyed.
Although
Because
they skate past that because he just has to be turned off.
right.
And given that he's been complaining in this episode about being left on when he has nothing to do, the implication is he would be alone forever in the ship with nothing to do.
Ugh,
They would put the ship
And-
on autopilot back to the Alpha Quadrant, and
right.
it gets there eventually.
And then
Maybe.
Hirogen capture it.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. That's the
Or
real
the Borg.
The real world thing is you don't leave this advanced level of technology in a quadrant where nobody has it.
Yeah.
You blow it up.
Yeah. In fact, we run into the problem once again that they can't download things. They can't download copies of things. We can only move files from one storage medium to another computer storage medium, and so for some reason the Doctor his software is so fully integrated that you can't download the copy of the software. He must be in firmware or something. I don't know.
And it's like, okay, he's a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
Right.
Who cares? I mean, yeah, someone may have altered his settings and just tweaked their preferences on the Doctor, which apparently they haven't. He's just right out of the box.
Yeah.
But at most, if I'm really super attached to Siri, which I shouldn't be,
Yeah.
I'm sure I can download a file somehow that has my Siri mods in it that I could apply to a new Siri.
Well, is Paris going to download Sandrine's? I mean, the fact is that it's so early. I could get it if it were later in the series, like in a couple seasons. They've become attached to the Doctor. He's developed a particular personality. They feel he's part of the crew. That he's different from an out of the box EMH. Okay, I get it. But at this point, he's still pretty much a stock EMH.
Yeah.
He's
and the
installed on
the
every
only-
ship.
The only thing valuable about him is what he's learned about medicine since he was booted, and that should all be in his medical files anyway, and those are
Right.
downloadable.
Right.
Well, and of course they've shown in like DS9 that you can copy hologram programs and pass them around
Right. Apparently.
Except for Vic.
because you have actual hologram authors who are making these holograms that are then being sent off to ships and space stations and everything else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a huge hole in that they've created for themselves by creating the Doctor the way they have, and they wanted to have this dramatic limitation, but it just doesn't hold up when you think about it more than a little bit, unfortunately. So we have this whole thing where we're beaming test modules, and then they want to beam someone over, but then they end up beaming the Romulan. The Romulan says you can't beam over to my ship; it would go in the logs, and I'd get in big trouble. So I'll beam over to yours, and that's when Tuvok discovers that part of the problems they've been having with the communication is that the wormhole travels not just through space but through time, and it is the Telek, which is the Romulan's name, is from 20 years in their past.
I thought his name was Telecramor.
Telek Ramor is his first name,
Oh.
last name. Telek is his
Oh, okay.
first.
I heard it as one.
Tell to his friends, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of other aspects of this is once he says the Romulan whatever will never allow Starfleet officers on this secret cargo ship science vessel.
Yeah.
Janeway is all, well, then how are we going to get back? And he's like, oh, I'll just call up a troop ship and that'll have more than enough room for you. But there's a ticking clock because this ancient decaying wormhole that's been here for centuries is going to collapse within 48 hours. So they've got to work all this out in that amount of time.
Right. Yeah. And there's a troop ship within, I mean, the Romulans must have troop ships everywhere, I guess.
Well, they move at the speed of plot. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So they realize now that they can't beam over because if they beam over, they'll be 20 years in the past. So they're back to the messages.
Let's talk about why. Because Harry Kim says, let's go.
Yeah.
We could just go hang out somewhere for 20 years until it's time,
Yeah. And Janeway says, okay, that would pollute so here's one of the reasons. That would totally pollute the timeline.
Right.
In all kinds of ways.
Legitimate.
And so Telek, or whatever his name is, says, well, I could alert Starfleet not to launch your mission in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
And Chakotay pipes up with, yeah, but we've already had a big impact on the Delta Quadrant, and if we alter the timeline again, it would be bad. So we either we can't ignore all the people we've helped, or he could be thinking that would still pollute the timeline in a substantial way if we never take this mission.
Right.
What nobody says, surprisingly, to my mind, is if we go back 20 years into the past in Romulan hands, they're not going to announce our rescue as a great propaganda triumph. They're going to vanish us and interview us for 20 years, pumping every bit of knowledge we have about the future and things they aren't aware of. That they're never going to let us go if we go back.
Not just technology, but events and people and dispositions of fleets and all that stuff. Yeah.
And grab as much off the computers from Voyager as they can before it's scuttled. And
right. So I think they're too polite to say that in front of Telek. We're more there.
One thing that kind of surprised me though, but I think the writers must not have developed it yet at this point, is the Temporal Prime Directive. Of course, you hear that in DS9, you heard it later Voyager seasons. But I don't think by this point in any of the series had they actually developed that idea of a temporal prime directive.
It was still sort of implicit,
it was implicit, but they never actually used those words like they would in later seasons.
Right.
Yeah.
In time travel stories, we did have moments of, that was the whole point of The City on the Edge of Forever. Edith Keeler has to die for history to go right.
Right. There's that great episode in DS9 where the Temporal Prime Directive investigation is carried out because the Tribbles one,
Trials and Tribulations.
Yeah, it's a great episode. So they're back to giving Telek Ramor their messages that he will promise to deliver in 20 years after the ship is gone. No one also brings up the fact that will Starfleet even believe this Romulan who's telling them not to send the mission, by the way, but for the first proposal. So Romulan's going to show up and say, oh, don't send Voyager on this mission because something's bad's going to happen. Why should we believe you? This is really strange.
Well, if he shows up out of nowhere with knowledge of this ship and this mission, that of itself lends. I was like, how would he know this if he hadn't got the message he claimed?
Right.
So I'm sure there would be a debate: do we believe him or not? But I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand.
And I'm sure if they had chosen to go that way, there were things that the Voyager crew could give him that would be proof.
Right. Yeah. That's true. So they give him the messages.
By the way, notice when they've been beaming these test cylinders back and forth to make sure the transporter works, it's not until Telek Ramor himself shows up that Tuvok discovers the phase variance that they've been having trouble with all this time is because of a time discrepancy.
Right.
It's like, why didn't you detect this with the cylinders?
Yeah. And so it's only after Telek Ramor is beamed back to his ship and is gone that Tuvok the Buzzkill reveals that, by the way, I checked the computer's database and found out that Telek Ramor died 4 years ago from their point of view, and that their messages never got delivered, And they can only hope that he left a will and instructions or something.
Or that the Romulan government will send them on or something. And
right.
I hated this part. I hated this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Initially, they're way too down on, he died, so our messages are never sent. And it's like, dude, he could have sent... Even today, we can schedule emails.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I would have a reminder in my AI assistant system to tell me in 20 years, because I'm going to have forgotten by then.
Right.
And I've probably just said, hey, Siri, why don't you just send those messages in 20 years?
Right.
Or maybe I send them today and let Starfleet keep them encrypted for 20 years or something.
Please don't open for 20 years. Yeah.
Or
kind of like Back to the Future. The movie Back to the Future 2, where he has an envelope sent from 1800s to 1955.
Right.
Yeah. Or even if he sent them in plain text to Starfleet, Starfleet's going to keep them secret because they don't want to pollute the timeline either.
Right. Yeah.
No,
we've seen this we've seen this in Doctor Who. You give it to a lawyer, whose firm is going to be around. There's various ways of getting around that problem.
I felt this entire scene was absolutely unnecessary. Why not leave them with the hope that his message actually had gone?
Right. Why? Yeah. Why dash their hopes? That's a good question. Why make that dramatic choice of dashing their hopes?
Because it would have changed absolutely nothing of the series except the idea of they know we're out here.
They might know we're out here.
Yeah.
Right.
They should. Yeah. So I mean, I felt that was a bad choice to end the episode on. I really do.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from people who think it was a good choice, that it would have been that it's a better choice than the way you mentioned it, Father Corey, because I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it would have been nice to have the satisfaction that they probably know we're out here now.
Yeah,
and to deliberately take that away. I mean, there is drama in that. But in order to get to that drama, they do it in this stupid, inelegant way where the listener, the viewer, can instantly think of multiple ways that the messages could still get through. And so they end with this note of ambiguity of we'll never know if they got through or not. And
yeah.
I mean, it's not like he had a wife,
awkward.
and not like he didn't have a wife and daughter or anything like that who could still have been alive. I mean, silly things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So,
also think about it. I mean, so you're a Cold War guy on a Soviet ship, and you get a message from a bunch of American Navy guys who are on Mars, and you beam over to Mars, and then you beam back, and you have all these messages from them. Those are going to vanish down a hole? I mean, there's going to be reports out the wazoo about this in Romulan archives.
Right.
And that means those messages are going to be remembered. He's not going to keep all this to himself.
Stored somewhere.
And so somebody is going to in 20 years' time, even for purely selfish reasons, say, "Oh, hey, Federation, we learned something interesting 20 years ago. You might want to know about. Let's make a deal."
Right. Right. Exactly.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they did give him a 20-year in advance USB key. So I mean.
There's a little bit of technology there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, to be fair, also with this episode, one of the reasons it's a better episode than others, they do not end by standing around consoles on the bridge pontificating. The episode ends in sickbay, where guess who's back? It's Lieutenant Baxter once again with a new hamstring thing. He's been working out again and pulled his hammy. And as you mentioned, Jimmy, that this is when the doctor tells him off about he's going to put him on report. And this time he's, "Sir, yes, sir, thank you, sir," to the doctor, and treats him like, "Oh, you're an actual person." And this is when the doctor says, "I must think of myself as a member of the crew now, and I'd like a name." And that's how we end it, with him asking for his name.
Science fiction proved long ago that you can have a series with a character who's a major character that is just known as the Doctor, and it's totally fine.
Exactly.
And it works.
Yes, exactly. All right. So, anything left to say about this episode? Any other notes?
Just one quick thing. The Romulan Telek was played by Vaughn Armstrong, who was later plays Admiral Forrest on Enterprise.
Right. That's Admiral Forrest. I knew that he looked familiar under all that makeup.
Spatial genetic multiplicity.
Exactly. Yes, Star Trek has it too.
Yes. Jimmy, what about you? Anything left to say?
I'm good.
Okay. So before we finish out, I do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Trek, including Jeffrey F., Catherine M., Kim L., Laura M., and Matthew B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to take a moment to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the podcast every week. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
He does a wonderful job, and we're going to note every week. We want to thank him for his work, purely out of the goodness of his heart. So we really do appreciate that. So that's it from us. What did you think of Eye of the Needle, this Voyager episode? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Enterprise episode, The Endorian Incident, which I think is one of the better episodes of the first season, at least according to my recollection. We'll see what I think after I've rewatched it.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Until then, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Aiken, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom, and live long and prosper.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember to look up a line to put here when I do this next time, because I totally forgot.
You can just send yourself the message in 20 years.
That's what I'll do. I will go back 20 years and send this message. Thanks for listening.